Good morning. Okay, I hope I make some sense today. First of all, thank you all, and it's really kind of a humbling honor and a blessing to be up here because I think anybody in this room could be up here. We all have a divine spark. We can all have something to give and stuff. So, what's happening today is hopefully something's coming through me, and can respond. I'm gonna put this out. This might be a dumb thing for me to say, but you can ask questions if you want to. I'm not promising you I'm gonna give you an answer, but you can ask, okay? Before we start, I'd like to offer a prayer. Divine presence, first of all, we know that you are always present. Always have been, always will be, and you are here now. We sometimes need you to remind us that you're here, so today we ask that you open our eyes and open our hearts so that we may know that you've been speaking to us this entire time, and perhaps we can hear something that might guide us through the week. This we ask in your divine name. Amen. Okay. Normally you get a topic, right? Well, I'm going to be honest with you. One of the reasons I didn't send one is because the last 2 weeks, it's changed every day. I'm one of these people that goes down the rabbit hole, but I don't go down news cycle rabbit hole. I don't go down the conspiracy rabbit holes. I go down rabbit holes of things that are real interesting to me. Sometimes it's music. We'll talk a little bit about that. But, I tried to remember that my spiritual life is the most important thing and it's going to guide everything else. So a lot of times I spend time just looking at things that might help me sort out things because I don't always get it, and it takes a while. Just had a conversation with Bill earlier this morning, and we were talking about how you got to study, sometimes understand what is presented, because the things that are presented, particularly in the Bible, which is what I'm going to talk about, aren't just surface stories, and that is one of the whole ideas of what unity is about. Charles Fillmore did not start out trying to start a new religion. Rather, what he did was try to offer us a set of tools to understand what he considered the foundation of spiritual understanding. And I was going to say it, sometimes we don't talk about this, but I noticed Stephen and Wanda have both been talking about this a lot. And this goes back to the unity idea. Charles Fillmore founded everything on what he perceived was in the Bible. Okay? That was his foundation. And if you look, this is funny. Just the kicks. I did an AI search, about unity. And one of the things it brought up about Charles Fillmore and his concepts was it says, a text for practical application rather than studying the Bible for theological knowledge alone. That's what he considered his thing, what he was doing. It says Fillmore encouraged the practical application through affirmations and positive practices. It says nearly all his sermons and books were based on Bible passages. Okay? Now here's the question. And so here's what I came up with. I came up with this last night after changing my mind 50 times and realizing it's not your mind. Listen to the Spirit, okay? And first what came out topic was 3 reasons for unitics. Those of us who say we're in the unity, 3 reasons for unitics to read the Bible. By the time I got done, it was 5 reasons. So let's go there. And because I know we don't do this all the time. And I know some of it has to do with the way things were taught to us before, simplified, believe this or else, and stuff like that. But unity is not about that. Its foundation is about going to get a deeper understanding. So, like I said, Charles Fillmore's concepts are tools for digging, okay? But it doesn't do any good to have tools to dig if you don't go to the mine and go to the mother lode. You got to have something to dig up, right? Okay. So, for him, it was the Bible. So the first reason that came to me was this. It is the core of unity teachings. All Charles Fillmore's teachings go back to his metaphysical understanding of the Bible. And that's not speculation. That is what it says, right? Reverend Wanda, really, every time she gets up here, what's one of the things she says based on the teachings of who? Right, okay. So if what we say we are working on is based on those teachings, how can we do anything with them if we don't know what they are? Right? You gotta know what they are before you can work with them. Now, it goes deeper than, like I said, it goes deeper than just stories. So that's the first principle, first thing that came up. That's one reason, because if we say that we're about unity, we should base our work on what the foundation of unity is, and that is Charles Fillmore's metaphysical understanding of what it says in the Bible. Okay? Notice I keep emphasizing metaphysical, because he wasn't saying, let's go back to this traditional and see on these stories. He wanted us to understand that everything in the Bible is really about one person, you, okay? Because you read stories of triumph. You read stories of tragedy. You read stories about jealousy. You read stories about love. And these are things that every last one of us has experienced. And when Jesus talks about these things, he provides a blueprint for how we deal with tells us, okay, if you're jealous and you're tripping, there's a way to deal with that. There's a way to deal with responsibilities. Forgiveness. Stephen talked about forgiveness last week and said, explain that Yeshua, you hear me use that term, Yeshua, that means Jesus, his Hebrew name. And you also hear me use the term Hashem sometimes, which literally in Hebrew means the name, and that refers to the Yud-He-Vav-He, the divine name. Okay. So he didn't say that, you just, forgiveness was just ask for forgiveness and it's given. One of his parables, and he taught in parables, was, remember when he talked about the man who owed the king money? You know that story? Okay? He owed the king money, and he went and he begged for forgiveness. Okay? And the king said, okay, fine. But this man had a servant that owed him money, and he was cruel, wasn't forgiving, wanted to have this man punished. So when the king found out about it, you know what he did? Threw the man in jail, had him punished. Okay. And so what is Yeshua teaching here about forgiveness? He's saying you cannot receive it if you don't give it. Okay. And that's a metaphysical principle of basically we have to let this flow. Bill talks about the foundation of all this being love. But if you don't give the love, you're not going to get the love treatment back. It's there for you, but you can't receive it if you block it going out. Think about that. If you put a dam in front of you, nothing is going to get out, right? But by the same token, nothing's going to get in. So if you block the love going out, you're going to block the love coming in. Okay? So, and one of the things about this is like, wow, I love this book. I hope most of you have got this. In Unity, hopefully all of you have a copy or access to this, the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. And it's a really great resource. But here's something to consider. A dictionary is there for you to understand words. And it's great to understand them. But if you're in grade school and you learn a new word, what's the first thing the teacher says to you? Use it. Use it in a sentence, right? You got to be able to put it to use. It's not enough to know what the word means. You utilize it to transmit some knowledge. So it has to have a context. And you don't make up you might make up a sentence, but the sentence is most likely going to be related to something that you understand every day, right? So, Charles Fillmore creates this wonderful, inspired dictionary with all these metaphysical meanings of these words from where? Bible. But how can you understand what they really mean if you don't put them in a context? You got to put them in context. And I'm going to try to be brief today because I know Susan's got a workshop today on the 12 powers at 11:45. Ruth's got, one today, correct? Course in Miracles, so I don't want to keep it too long. But let me bring this up because we're talking about the 12 powers. And the 12 powers are represented, I'm sure you all know, in understanding of unity as the disciples. And every disciple is associated with a particular power, like faith, strength, discrimination, things like that. But just as an example of how to utilize this and why it is important to put it in the context of the Bible, okay? Anybody know who the first disciple was called? Who? Peter. Anybody know who Peter represents, what it represents? Faith. Yeah, the rock, faith. So everything first starts here with faith. Okay, and if you understand that, you'll get an understanding of this story. There's a story about Yeshua. You know, the disciples out in the boat, and Yeshua comes walking across the water to them, right? And everybody loves to talk about Yeshua walking on water. But if you know the story, Peter walked on water too, right? So Peter's, oh, wow, here comes the master. He gets out and he starts to walk. But what happens? He starts to go down. If you read the story, here's what happens. Think about this. The Christ there, and I'm going to say Yeshua, but this is the Christ spirit, the evolved spirit that is in touch with the one power. And as long as Peter, faith, has his eyes focused on the Christ spirit, he walks on water. Now, when you're at sea, they say you're lost, right? So when he looks down and realizes, I'm at sea, what happens? He sinks. So, right, so one of the stories, what the understanding to get from this is that it's not just about walking on water. It's that you can do whatever you need to or want to do as long as your faith is focused on that inner spirit that has everything you need. But when you take your eyes off of that, you got a problem. You're going to sink. Another thing that plays into that, in unity understanding is the concept of imagination. Because imagination can either take you to the stars or the lack of it can limit you to sit in your driveway with the engine turned off if you can't imagine going somewhere. So when you look at that and you understand that story from the metaphysical standpoint, you see how you can apply that in life. Don't be afraid. I got something to do. As long as I keep the faith focused, I'm there. Another understanding that comes from putting this in context, 12 powers, right? Okay? Yeshua did not start his public ministry until he had assembled all of his disciples. So what does that mean? He did not start his work until he had brought all 12 of his faculties under his control, under control of the Christ Spirit. So now when you read that, if you go and read that story, it gives you even more insight into what's going on. They're not just esoteric terms out here. Oh, we have these 12 powers. So we need a demonstration. How do we do this? So we look at Yeshua with a ministry, and he has to have, first of all, he has to have his faith there. And this symbolizes his faith in the Father, in the One. He has to have the strength to carry it through discrimination and judgment, to know which voices are talking and which way to go. Because we hear a lot of voices, right? We all have that one that tells us, I've had it, telling you things that probably are not going to serve you. So you have to be able to discern which voice is speaking. love. Bill talks about that, like I said. Because in order for this to be the work of the divine, it has to be rooted in love. Not control, not proving that you're right, but love. In other words, in trying to inject some spirit, let it flow out with the dam down so other people can benefit from it and pass it on. Power. Obviously, you got to have power to accomplish something. Imagination. You got to think of what's possible. And you have to be able to think of beyond what you see right here, right now. You got to be able to think, this is big, this room, but I can see this room bigger. You got to be able to think like that. Understanding. You can have all the information in the world and read all the books that you want to, but if you don't understand what they mean, you're just going to be babbling and telling people, and they're going to say, what do you mean by that? Well, there's a lot of terms people use now today, and I ask them, what does that mean? And they can't tell me. Okay? That won't help. You got to have understanding. You have to have the will to do these things. Zeal. Susan likes that one. And, you got to be excited about this. Otherwise, things start to fall. And you've seen people who do something who don't have zeal about it, right? Does it move you? Nah. And renunciation or elimination, this is one that sometimes people have a problem with. And we belong to a movement that says New Thought, right? In other words, understanding things differently. And there are other things that besides Bill Moore and other people that, there's this transcendental ideas, and there's some things that come from other places. Lately I've been reading, and Stephen had, mentioned this once, I've been reading the Bhagavad Gita a lot. And one of the things that they talk about in the Gita is like being able to work without what they call fruitive motives. In other words, you do things not because you expect them to work out. You do them because this is what you do. Yeshua talks about this too. He said that when it comes to love, it doesn't mean anything if you love the people who love you and you love the people who are like you. He said, you won't be like me. I want to see if you can love these people who despise you and dislike you. Okay? That is an exercise in renunciation, because if you're only going to do things because you think it's going to pay off, you're going to lead a miserable life. You're going to be happy part of the time, but you're going to run into a situation where you don't get what you expect. So to me, renunciation is renouncing that idea that I got to get something out of it and simply doing it because it's the right thing to do. One of my favorite stories in the Bible, once again, understanding these principles, is the idea of Jonah and being swallowed up. Well, one of the things that people don't always talk about is that Jonah's problem was he didn't want to go to Nineveh. He said, they're not going to listen anyway. Okay? And Hashem was basically saying, I didn't say they had to listen to you. I asked you to do something for me. Just go tell them. Yeah, but they won't listen, and they're going to be this, and no, just go tell them. And this is what love is about. If we love the divine, we serve the divine, and we don't make commercial deals with the divine. Okay? We don't say, and we see this a lot nowadays in some of the teachings that we get in our society. Well, Lord, I'm going to give you this 10%, and I know you're going to pay me back tenfold. So I didn't know when God became an ATM. Okay, but that's the way we're talking, you know. And so like I said, that is a commercial endeavor. That is not love. True love is you give love without expectation. That's the real renunciation. Renunciation, the fruits of what you do. Doing it because this not only is what you're supposed to do, but as the second principle is, well, we are made, God is in us, and therefore we are inherently good, correct? So we do this when we are in touch with our divine nature because it is who we are, not because we are looking for accolades or payoff. So that's why that's important for the work. And life conservative, Judas. But still, We got to, like, in life, I'm not talking about just this, but that understanding that the spirit is eternal, soul is eternal, and that we continually do in the world before this one and the one beyond. So if you see that, can you understand how important those things are to any endeavor? All of them. That's why we got 12. We need them all. And I admit, in going through this, something came to me that what I need to start doing with things that I'm trying to do in my life. I said, wow, I've been remiss in utilizing these lessons. So what I want to do is make a concerted effort. Now when I do things, to sit down and look at this list and say, where are these things in me as I go out and do this? Are they in balance? And they need to be in balance too, because I can't just pick the 3 that I like and do those, because something like if I say will, faith, strength, and will, I might willfully drive myself off of a cliff. I got to have some discernment in there. I got to have some love, so that's right. But I got to have all those things in there so that the endeavor works, which is why the meaning of the story, Yeshua started his public ministry after he had assembled those 12 and placed them under his command. They were serving the master, correct? And the Christ Spirit took control of them. And if you read that in the Bible, you start to understand what's really going on. I mean, what are the 12 powers? How were they utilized? How were they set up? Okay. Here's another one. Third reason. Great spiritual principles are hidden in plain view, and I had that in quotes, so I wrote this down. If you're willing to put the resources we have at your disposal and go down the spiritual rabbit hole. What do I mean by that? We, in New Thought, a lot of times kind of have this arrogance. Let's be honest. Oh, those people are doing that, but we're so involved, that type of thing. And forget where we came from. Okay? Because a lot of us came from different traditions originally, and they helped us to get there. And once again, going back to where Charles Fillmore got his ideas, based on the Bible. So I know that you've probably heard at times there have been Christian churches that said, oh, we don't believe in that meditation thing. That's devilish. Now, you can get upset and want to argue. But rather than argue, if you know the Bible, you understand that the very first psalm says what? Thus says the person walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of Hashem. And in this law does he what? Meditate day and night, all the time. Okay. So there's that question. Nope. Bible says the very first psalm, I should meditate in this. Now, here's another thing that's hidden in here. Well, it's not hidden. It's in plain sight if we dig. Okay? Where it says meditate in that law, and people are going to take out the 10 Commandments and all that, right? But where does the Bible say the law is actually written? Anybody know? Where? Yeah, in the heart. And it says this in some interesting ways. Okay. One of them is like the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. And we talk about this. And people call that the law. Stephen, this man's brilliant, knows all kinds of like stuff about the language and stuff. This is important. Torah is kind of more instructions, right? This is things that you should be doing. Rather than law, it has a different thing. I'm trying to explain to you how to do this, is what it means. Hebrews read right to left, okay? So if you look in the last book of the Torah, the first 5 books, Deuteronomy, the last word is Israel or Yisrael, okay? And it ends with the letter Lamed. The first word is Bereshit, which begins with the letter Beit or Veit, depending on where it's at. check this out. Read right to left. If you take that last letter in this first letter and you take everything out of it, you take all the other letters, you left with the letters Lamed Vape, or Lamed Vape. Guess what that spells? Lev, and it means, anybody? Heart. So it's laid out there. Got all these words here, but the truth of the matter is, everything you need to know is written in your heart. Because if you were designed by the divine power, and in that image, everything that is in the divine is in you. Greater is he that is in you that is in the world. Remember that? Think about that. So all this stuff out here is nothing compared to what is in you if you access it. And one of the things that we teach in unity, or things is what? Prayer and meditation, right? This also, if you read, Yeshua also tells folks, when you pray, where do you pray? Where do you go to pray? In your closet. What does closet mean? What do you think it really means? Within, okay? He says go within. Now, here's one, too. It's like, folks, and I'm standing up here talking, but I got to say this. It's like, it's nice that people can teach us and give us things. But at the end of the day, think about this. If you go into the closet with your father, am I in there? Hopefully not. Somebody said that one day. I hope not. Okay. You are in there with just you and the Father. So how am I going to tell you what the Father said to you? Think about that. How do I know what was told to you to do? In your heart, if you're honest, you know what you're supposed to do when you go and communicate. Now, you may come to me and say, the Father told me this. You got any ideas what that might mean? And I might be able to help you. But at the end of the day, that message was, I don't care who it is. I got some buddies, I don't mean to crack on them hard, but I know they always telling me, that they got this message and Lord told me you're going to do this, that, and the other. And I'm a smart aleck, so sometimes I say, well, he ain't tell me yet. Okay? Because my thing is, I don't want to get myself into trouble doing something you told me to do when he didn't tell me to do that, okay? And I've seen that happen to people who've gone out and tried to start ministries and other things, and it wasn't what they were supposed to do. But they let other people tell them. And at the end of the day, I remember when I worked at Frost, I had a minister come and have me print an article about him resigning from the ministry because he admitted that he got into it because everybody else told him, you should be this minister. And he got up there and he said, he went crazy, and just, I'm doing this, and got to be this big shot. And he said one day, voice came to God's voice, said, you doing what? I thought it was me. And he stepped down because he had created all these problems in his church because of this ego. And this is another one. Think about this. When Yeshua was in the wilderness and he's tempted, he's taken to where? To the top of the temple, right? Oh, and in this evil inclination, I'm going to use that rather than the devil. The evil inclination is saying to him, you the man. You do anything you want to. Throw yourself down. Man, the angel's going to catch you. Don't worry about it. You're on the temple, right? Okay, so the warning is that when we start to study these spiritual things, that we have to be careful not to think that we are so righteous and above everything that we can do whatever we want to. But Yeshua said, nah, I'm not tempted. My father like that. I'm not going to do that. But some of us do. We figure we can get away with anything. That's in there if you read the stories. So that's that. And then, and like I said, the idea that this, and the prophets say this in a number of places. The law is written in here. So everything you need to know, you have to practice what we do in unity. Pray, meditate. Okay? And use the imagination that gives the affirmations that guide us toward that. Okay? This one, everybody gonna like? Nah, I don't care. That's all right. I'm gonna say it. This one principle is that Also, if you read the Bible, there's some practical information in there about how we should do things, okay? Here's one from Exodus 23:9. Do not oppress the foreigner, because you yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners, because you were foreigners in Egypt. Enough said. Okay? Here's one. Oh, same one. When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat him. A foreigner living with you must be treated as one of your native born. Love him as yourself, for you were aliens in Egypt. That's from Leviticus. I don't need to explain why I said that, right? You get it. Here's another one. We got all this nostalgia. We're going to make it like it used to be. Do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it is not wise to ask such questions. That's from Ecclesiastes 7. Okay? 7:10. Interesting, because Wanda just talked about that. We say when we talk about things with better, that's like saying that God, Shem did his best already and it's all over, right? You really want to say that to the divine? And you did your best 20 years ago. I don't think I want to say that. Okay. Right? So that's why we shouldn't be longing for that. Okay. Susan knows I like Psalm 82, and particularly the 6th verse, which talks about us being what? Gods, made in the image of the Father. This says we're gods. But that 82nd Psalm also has some other things that we need to think about. We are considered gods, but it says Hashem, the one, judges among the gods, us. But one of the things that psalm repeats over and over is that you need to do right by the poor and the oppressed. Otherwise, you die a spiritual death, and you lose the power of God. I'm not going to read it to you. Go and read it. But if you don't do that, then you've lost your divinity. I mean, it's still there, but you've lost touch with it. You lose your powers. You lose the ability to control those 12 powers when you don't do this, because that's what you're supposed to be doing. Divisions. We get so mad when people disagree. Now everybody fighting, killing each other, going crazy. But I want you to think about something. Proverbs 24:6. This is, like I said, this is why I like to read and go to the source that Charles Fillmore went to. It says, for by wise counsel thou shalt make thy war, and in a multitude of counselors there is safety. We got this really bad now, that if people disagree with us, we cut them off, we want to silence them and things like this. But remember when the Israelites were about to go into Canaan, they sent spies out, right? Sent 12, once again, 12. 12 of them. They sent 12 out. 10 of them came back saying, no, we can't do it. Nope. 2 came back and said, no, we can do this. Hashem is on our side. We're going to be okay. If those 10, or if Moses only wanted to deal with those people who agreed with him, none of Israel would have gone to Canaan. None of them would have gone to his promised land, which would give them a new body. In other words, a new place to develop. Had he been only willing to listen to the people in agreement, or who said what he was already thinking. And I'm sure that Joshua and Caleb were the 2 guys that everybody was like, oh no, here they go again. You know, I don't want to hear this. But without those, the divine has given each one of us gifts and a voice that is unique in this incarnation. There's a reason for that. None of us can contain all of it at one time. It would be too much for us. So we work best when we are willing to put ourselves together and hear what's there. Some things I might be inspired by and know that they came from others. I'm lost. So I got to say, well, what do you think about that? And this is how we put it together. There's a principle in Judaism where they talk about honest debate over the meaning of the scriptures. It's fine. Not debate to prove that you're right, somebody is wrong. Not debate to get your way, but to say, it's okay to say, I'm not quite sure. I think this is what this means. And somebody says, well, consider this. This is how we learn. We are in a human form right now, and we can't translate that total truth through this body and through this physical brain. We got to work to get at it. And sometimes it helps if somebody else can say, well, let's look at it from that perspective. Learn. So that's why it's okay for us to have honest disagreements and to talk about them civilly. Okay, one more. I have it here somewhere. I don't know where it is. Okay. The last one basically is this. I don't need to look at it. I know what it is. And here's what it is. If we go out and say that we represent unity and we believe in unity principles, and unity principles are based upon the teachings of Yeshua, Charles Fillmore said, kind of disingenuous for us to tell people that and we don't know what those teachings are. Think about that. We should know. I'm not saying that you got to read this and totally understand it, but you would think that we would at least be somewhat familiar and be able to tell at least one story and explain how Charles Fillmore used the tools that he provided us to dig into that story to lead us to a truth. But if we say that what we believe is based on these biblical principles and we've never read any of it, I'm going to pick on Stephen again. He tells this story about teaching guitar. And teaching somebody, and he's telling them these, okay, this is how this works, and okay, saying, no, I know, I can do it, I know. But Stephen finally breaks it down, and he says, well, then play it. Okay? Because if you can't play it, you don't know the music. I don't care how much theory you got. If you can't apply it, if you can't put it in a song, you can't recognize it in that song. So we can tell these people all these theories about what these things mean metaphysically, and the definitions are fine. But without context, what can people do with it? I had a friend who just went through a real tragedy. And one of the things she said to me when I talked to her was like, she was tired of people telling her everything's going to be all right. That they know how she felt, and they didn't. Because she had gone through something that most people never go through, and even people who go through the same thing don't experience the same way. This was the loss of a child. And she said, don't tell me you know how you feel. They didn't. Because they were talking theory. And that wasn't what she needed. But extreme, but what I'm saying is that let's not talk theory all the time. Let's be able to tell people, I looked at this, I saw this story, and I saw myself in it, and be able to tell that story the same way. But you got to be able to go back to the source to understand the context and get the context to understand the real meaning, and then you can go and apply it to the real world. Okay? That's it for today. Now, if you don't mind, and if you'd like to, let's do a brief meditation. I think we're okay. Very brief meditation. I'm going to just throw out some suggestions. You don't have to do this. Let's start, first of all, by you want to close your eyes. You feel comfortable doing that? I want you to take a series of deep breaths and hold them a bit. But as you exhale, don't push the air out. Just let it go out. In other words, Exhale with no tension. Release all the tension in your body. Just let the air flow out. Do that a few times. Now, next thing, if you like, I want you to envision a trunk, kind that you store things in. Set it beside you. And put inside that trunk right now any health concerns you have, any money concerns you have, any relationship concerns you have, any time concerns about what you got to do next. Put those in that trunk because you don't need them right now. Just put them in there, shut the lid on it. Take that and place that behind you. Set for a moment, and if anything else comes up to bother you, just reach back and toss that in the trunk and shut it. Say, I don't need this right now. As you continue to breathe, I want you to consciously start to release the muscles in your face, starting with your lips, your brow, the area around your eyes. Consciously relax your scalp. Let that relaxation flow inside. Feel it. Now let it spread out down into your shoulders. Relax your shoulders. Don't move on until you really feel like they've relaxed. Let it flow down your arms, to your hands, fingers. Let it spread through your chest, your abdomen, down your legs, all the way to your feet. Lastly, let your toes relax. It's okay if you feel almost sleepy from that. Just totally relax. Now, try to just empty your mind and be. If thoughts creep in, that's okay. Just push them back. It's not essential that we stay here a long time at the moment, but just remember this feeling, and remember you can access this at any time. Quiet yourself. Because in the quiet, this is when you can hear divine speaking to you. You can't hear if we're talking at the same time. Sometimes all it takes is just that slight moment for us to hear what we need to hear. So remember this process. Now, when you're ready, continue to breathe, but slowly open your eyes. Maybe move your body around a little bit and wake your body back up. Know that you can go to this place at any time you want. Find peace, the quiet you need to hear the divine voice. Thank you.